the contents have it. After Clause 12, Amendment 46, Baroness Stoll of Beeston.
My Lords, I beg to move Amendment 46. In introducing this group, I will speak directly to the three amendments in my name, 46, 47 and 64. I will also make some general remarks about the issue of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is the theme of this group, but I will come to those in a moment. The Noble Lord McNally said earlier that I had moved my amendments from a different group, and I hope through my remarks in introducing them it will be clear as to why. But in doing so, I didn't realise that I would end up opening this group of amendments. So I offer my apologies to the Noble Lord Stevenson of Belmacara for usurping his position in getting us started. I am grateful to the Noble Baronesses Lady Bull and Featherstone for adding their names. The amendments represent the position of the Communications and Digital Select Committee of Your Lordship's House. So in proposing them, I do so with that authority. And my co-signatories are a recent and current member. And I should just add from the Noble Baroness Lady Featherstone her sincere apologies for not being here this evening. And if she's watching, I send her my very best. My Lords, during the committee's time when my noble friend Lord Gilbert of Panteng was in the chair, it carried out an inquiry into freedom of speech online, as has already been remarked upon this evening. And as part of that, the committee concluded that the government's proposals in the then draft online safety bill, in fact it may have been just the white paper at that time, for content described as legal but harmful, were detrimental to freedom of speech and called for changes. Since then, as we know, the government has dropped legal but harmful and instead introduced new user empowerment tools for adults to filter out harmful content. And as we heard in earlier groups this evening, these are to allow people to turn off or on content such as eating disorders and self-harm. Now, some members of our committee might favour enhanced protection for adults, and indeed some of my colleagues have already spoken this evening in support of amendments to that end in other groups. But what we as a committee agreed earlier this year when we looked at the online safety bill as it had been reintroduced to Parliament is that, as things stand, these new user empowerment tools are a threat to freedom of speech because there is no way of judging their impact or effectiveness, whether that's good or bad. So whatever one's view is, there is not a way of judging their effectiveness. The government has dropped the requirement for platforms to provide a public risk assessment about how these tools would work and their impact on freedom of speech, as we've heard already this evening. Now, to be clear, for these user empowerment tools to be effective, as we've already heard, the platforms will have to identify the content that users can switch off, which gives them, the platforms, great power over what is deemed harmful to adults. So Amendments 46, 47 and 64 are about ensuring tech platforms are transparent in how they are balancing the principles of privacy, safety and freedom of speech for adults. These amendments would require platforms to undertake a risk assessment and publish a summary in their terms of service. And this would involve them being clear about the effect of user empowerment tools on users' freedom of expression. Without such assessments, there is a risk that platforms do either too much or too little, and it will be very difficult to find out how they are filtering content, on what basis, and how they are addressing the twin imperatives to ensure online safety without unduly affecting free speech. So just to be clear, these amendments, unlike other amendments in earlier groups, are neither about seeking to provide greater protection to adults or indeed not about trying to reopen or revisit the question of legal but harmful. They are about ensuring transparency to give all users confidence about how platforms are striking the right balance. So whilst the purpose of them is to safeguard freedom of speech, they would also bring benefits to those adults who want to opt in to the user empowerment tools, because they'll be able to assess what it is they are choosing not to see. And so it's because of their twin benefits, indeed their benefit to everyone, that we decided formally as a committee to recommend these amendments to the government and for debate by your Lordship's House. That said, the debate earlier suggests support for a different approach to enhancing protection for adults, and we may discover through this debate a preference for other amendments in this group to protect freedom of speech. But that is why we have brought these amendments forwards. Now, I'm going to take off my Select Committee hat now and say a few other remarks about freedom of expression. But I'm not going to say very much because I have the privilege of responding at the end. And indeed, there are noble lords in the chamber this evening who are far more steeped in this important principle of freedom of speech than me, and I'm keen to listen to what they have to say in order to judge which of their amendments, if any, I will lend my support. But I should add that perhaps unlike some other noble lords who will speak in this group, I'm less about freedom of speech as an end in itself and more as a means to a thriving democracy and healthy society. I've said on various public platforms over the last few months that I would have preferred this bill to be only about child safety, so we could learn before deciding what, if any, further steps to take, but we are where we are. What concerns me about the online world we now inhabit is in whose hands the power exists to decide what we get to see and debate. Who has the power to influence what's an acceptable opinion to hold? Who has the power to shape society to such an extent they can influence and change what we believe is right or wrong? There is a real dilemma for me between the big tech platforms' resistance to the responsibility that comes with being a publisher and as giving them that power and responsibility via this bill. We'll come back to the question of power and how we ensure that it is spread properly between Parliament, the executive, regulator and media platforms in a later group. But as we have decided to legislate for online safety, I want us to be as sure as we can that we're not giving away political powers to individuals or institutions who have no democratic mandate or are not subject to suitable oversight. So this group on freedom of speech and the clauses to which the amendments relate is why I think it's an important group. And one final point before I sit down. Freedom of speech is also a critical element of the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Bill, and why I have been so concerned that it was introduced alongside online safety. I am glad it has finally arrived in Parliament and that we will get to examine it before too long. But that's for another day. And for now, my lords, I beg to move.
Amendment proposed, insert the following new clause as printed on the Marshall list.